I want to talk about this new lawsuit against the city of Dallas for not enforcing its laws against public homeless encampments. Specifically, this next story is exactly what the proposition was intended to do that we just voted on in November, and that was to be allowed to sue the city of Dallas for not enforcing its own laws. Now, this is interesting because, boom, we already have this one in action. The same group that got the propositions on the ballot that we voted on is now suing the city of Dallas for not enforcing its own laws against camping in public spaces. And we all know this is for homeless people. This isn't like for some guy in Highland Park who thought it'd be exotic to go hang out under the bridge for a night, so it's a tough one because this all tears at our heartstrings, especially if you have that Christian nobility of helping the sick and the poor. But what do we do with these people? When you kick them out of their tent from under the bridge, where do you take them? Do you take them to jail? Do you just say, I don't care where you go, you can't stay here? No easy answers to this. And I'll give you my thoughts after we talk to John in Dallas. You're next up on WBAP. What's your thoughts on what do we do with these homeless encampments?
Hello.
Hey, John, go.
Hey, what's going on? This is John from Dallas. Anyway, I just wanted to say I drive Uber around town. And what I've noticed is, like you said, there's people under the bridge. And I don't know if other than some of them, for the most part, I think most of them get a paycheck, get an income from Social Security or just so they have something coming in. Just real quick, an idea I had was maybe enclose the bridges underneath the bridge and close it somehow to where if the city can make money, the city will enforce the law. But they haven't found a way to make money off these people or off this situation. But if they enclose the bridge and charge the people to come in and lodge, and for shelter, that would be a way for them to make money. And believe me, they would enforce it at that point. And that's just an idea. And there's a lot of bridges under there. I drive by them all the time. They're completely empty. I mean, there's a lot of room there, a lot of space to utilize. And I don't feel like I feel like it's just wasted real estate under the bridges.
I feel that way too. I would prefer they turn it over to like private sector commercial use rather than just kind of codifying the de facto use of being a homeless encampment. But one thing I've learned is, I first had to study and deal with this on the radio here in Dallas, and then I learned the same thing when I went to when I was on in New Orleans. And the fact that the number one thing you hear thrown out, well, we need to have more resources available, or we need to do more with homeless shelters, or, we need to throw more money at the problem. Well, what actually happens is, to give you an example, there was a big homeless encampment under the bridge right behind the radio station when I was in New Orleans, and it's right by the Superdome. So they clean it out right before football season starts because they don't want you to see all the homeless people on Monday Night Football or whatever. So I would go interview these people, and then I went and I actually interviewed the New Orleans mission, and I was like, well, are y'all just packed tonight, or are y'all full to the brim? What capacity are you at? They're like, we're not even halfway full. And I'm like, well, why 2 blocks away do we have a giant homeless encampment? They don't want to stay in the homeless shelters.
Well, they don't want to stay because you're making it. We're making it more than it has to be. You can't change these people. You can't say, hey, you can't be drinking and you can't do dope and you got to be in at this time. You can't put those kind of regulations on it.
But what that means is we're always going to have homeless people. We can minimize it. We can get it smaller than it is now. But we actually do put enough resources out there that no one has to sleep on the street. You do have to follow some laws. You can't be booting black tar heroin in the homeless shelter. You also can't be punching other people in the homeless shelter. You can't be, exposing yourself or a bad actor. And so even with all the resources we have, and there's more shelter beds available than homeless people in pretty much every major American city, we're rich. We're the richest country ever. Yeah, it's hard to understand, but some people prefer to be homeless. And so now you're pretty much dealing with people who are either mentally ill, just psychos, or they have an addiction issue. But there's, for almost everyone who's just down on their luck, someone will let you sleep on their couch or stay in their garage. You have an aunt, you have an uncle, you have a high school friend, you have an old boyfriend, or you have something. The network around here is great, but it's not that we're not throwing enough resources at it. And I don't have an answer. I don't know what we do about the people who are so ill behaved they don't want to go into the homeless shelters. I have no answer for that. 800-288-9227. And it's just hard for me to accept. Some people just love camping out. They just love being outside. They prefer that to being indoors in climate control. Why? Because they got to have their liquor or they got to have their drugs it's so bizarre. I wish there was an easy answer, but I still don't have one yet. And I've been reporting on these things for 20 something years. My next guest, Renata Castro, back on from USA for All. She is running a full service immigration firm out there. And, I feel like it's unfair to our legal immigrants how much of our bandwidth and discussion is used on illegal immigrants. Let's focus on the legal ones here. Can they expect any changes with the new administration coming in January?
Yes, it's very likely that those who are still waiting for some reason, financial, personal, to start an immigration petition, that the Trump administration will enact an increase in fees. Otherwise, it'll be very hard for the government to justify the budgetary increase on law or immigration enforcement without a source to cover that expenditure. So the natural progression will be for fees to be higher for those seeking legal immigration. In addition, because the order will be to dial up and tighten things up, immigration cases, legal immigration cases, will take a lot longer just because USCIS, which is the immigration agency, just doesn't have the bandwidth to accommodate an increase in cases and an increase in time spent per case. Just recently, the USCIS location in Vermont, a processing center, laid off 170 employees in light of a transition to digital cases. However, as a practicing attorney, I can say that USCIS is very behind on the technology and on the execution of online cases. So I believe that we will see more expensive immigration case and a much lengthier time for legal immigrants to obtain the right to work and the right to live in the United States legally.
Well, that's wild. 170 people got fired in Vermont. That's like 30% of their population. Just making a joke there. But yeah, you don't normally think of Vermont as a border state, but they are like the straight line from Montreal down to New York City, I suppose.
Yes, and USCIS has a tendency to put processing centers in areas which need an incentive to create jobs. So it is counterintuitive that as the demand for immigration cases is picking up, we're actually laying off people. But I guess there's one thing you and I agree. American government doesn't always make sense in its decisions. And I think this is a prime example of it.
Oh, we totally agree on that. Now, Renata Castro, another immigration subgroup that I think gets left out of the conversation is people here that would like to immigrate with an E to other countries. Well, whether they're leaving for a job or for love or because they promised everyone that they would leave if Trump got elected. What's the process going to be like? Is there going to be any big changes for people trying to leave the country?
I think that'll be very jurisdiction specific. And one of the things that we have seen is that countries that used immigration to, stimulate its economy, that's the case in Portugal, for example, the government is making it more expensive because demand is up. That's the most basic capitalistic principle of any exchange. If demand is up, you can afford to increase prices. So in my personal opinion, I believe that jurisdictions that are seeing a pickup in demand, such as Portugal, will have an increase, but I don't think it'll be enough to stimulate those who want to move to other countries. I think that the United States currently is the country that's going to tighten up its immigration policies the most. Now, I believe there will be countries which will take advantage of these bright scientists, engineers who want to move outside of their country. The question is, will the United States economy remain the supreme object of desire of those individuals? Because that's what brings people here. It's the safety and the economic prospects of growth.
All right. If you are consulting with someone who's an immigrant here and their visa's about to run out and they don't think it is going to get renewed, but they don't want to go back home, what would be like the second choice country for people who were enjoying the United States but now have to find somewhere else?
That's a great question. I always discuss with people alternatives to moving to Canada. I'm not licensed there, but for professionals, that was a country that was very receptive. And there are some countries in Europe that still have a strong economy and a somewhat welcoming immigration policy. Australia is also an option. I believe that I would stay between those countries for those that are looking to work. Because when we talk about immigration has different shades for the different seasons of people's lives. If you are a multimillionaire, I may not recommend, and I've done that in the past, may not recommend for you to come to the United States because taxation may not make it worth your time if you're not going to make money in the United States. They may be better off moving to Dubai, for example. But if you're looking to work, if you're still young and you may have a young family, the United States presents a lot of prospects, and I would think that Canada would be a very close second.
Well, fun stuff. Renata Castro, where do they find your work online if they need some immigration help?
USA for All, USA, the number 4all.com.
Thank you very much, Renata Castro. Appreciate your time on the James Show again. Love having you on.
Thanks for having me.
And so you would probably enjoy seeing some of the emails and messages I get in the background. They're like, yeah, I love your show. I love the WBAP. I just got wrapped up in it, at some point in the last few years. And man, I just can't believe how bad the media has gotten. And I have to have this conversation over and over with new people. No, the media has always been this bad. You just weren't listening to the other side of the argument. So you had no idea how bad they were. Or maybe you just started paying attention. And there was a handful of times that this came up in the last year or so, like when Trump got shot at and hit in July. What was the immediate speculation? Oh, the guy's a Republican. Remember how they were reporting on that? Oh, he's Republican. He's another crazy right-winger. Yeah, because that's what a right-winger would do. Shoot at their own presidential candidate. Brilliant. It's just great deductive reasoning you have over there. You're all a bunch of Sherlocks in the media. I'm so impressed. But this is the rationale they come out with any of these before we know. There was a Times Square bomber where... If you're thinking a bomb went off in Times Square, no, but like an SUV was smoking out of it, and there was a failed Times Square bomber. And until we got the deets on who this guy was, I have montages of the media saying, yeah, probably a right winger. The dude that shot up the Christian school in Nashville, they were like, oh, look, another school shooter must be a right winger. Now it was an upset trans person and all the other trans things that have been going on. With this drone situation, now there's some people saying, well, this might be an evil right winger. They conjure up an evil right-winger for so many of these situations where we don't have any answers. They were even saying that this guy shot the United Health CEO. Oh, it was probably a Trumpian. I can go find you 10 people that say that. And I put together a montage that was so good. I'm like, I'm just going to stop doing this and use this montage every time it happens. There was the Boston Marathon bombing. Now, it happened on Patriots Day on April 15th. That's when they do the Boston Marathon. And so it turns out that we now know that it was a Muslim terror attack. These guys they were recently naturalized citizens from Chechnya in Russia. And, they're part of a separatist movement that hates Christianity and wants to be a part of the caliphate. And this was all motivated by their mutual hatred of the United States, in addition to their love of Islam. But until we found that out, all we saw from the surveillance videos was there's a couple of white-looking guys.
More conventional explosives, which are much harder to get hold of now. That might be some other kind of right-wing extremists. And
Tax day today, that came up. But of course, it's Patriots Day. Would you, as an expert, be thinking domestic? I don't think tax day means a whole lot to the Arab world or the Islamic world or certainly not to Al-Qaeda in terms of their world. It doesn't have any iconic significance.
We really don't know who did this. It was tax day. Was it someone who was you just don't know.
This is well within the capability of somebody with too much time in front of the internet who is looking up bombs and who hates the government, who hates America.
If you are looking to make some kind of a political statement, that would be the place to do it. Copley Square on Marathon
and we
Day.
have the notion of Patriots Day, that this comes at a time when you had the Oklahoma City bombing in April a few years back, also the Waco Branch Davidian standoff.
Normally, domestic terrorist people tend to be on the far right, although that's not a good category, just extremists, just call them that.
Good Lord, these people are awful human beings. You probably don't remember that. It doesn't get repeated, but I just want to remind you also, you never got an apology from those people for being slandered like that. The right wing never gets an apology for that. And they don't really get it wrong going the other way. So when I was showing you yesterday how they got Benghazi wrong, when they got Obamacare wrong, when they had got the Iran 9 months away from getting the nuclear weapon, when they got Hunter Biden's laptop wrong, when they got 2016 Russia Trump collusion wrong, when they got George Zimmerman wrong, when they got the Afghan withdrawal wrong, when they got so many of these other situations wrong, you never get an apology. And these are the same people that are going to be so concerned about misinformation. They're so concerned about Trump lying. Stop it. It's not even believable. Could you quit slandering us for 5 minutes and start reporting the truth? No, they're not bad now. They've always been bad.